Hi, this is Noor. I identify as a non-binary transmasculine person. I have been in transition for about 6 years, since my second year of college, and I've been physically transitioning since my third year of college, so 4 or 5 years at this point. I identify very strongly with fluidity, and I identify strongly with the idea that you don't have to be traditionally masculine to be a man or to be masculine-centered. I feel very strongly that I'm settled in my gender identity. I feel very strongly that I understand who I am, and I'm very proud of who I am. So, some stuff I wish I'd known about gender stuff when I was growing up and grappling with it. I think the main thing is that people that look like me and people that have my type of brain can be trans, and that is okay. That's a perfectly normal variation on human life. I think what I struggled with a lot growing up was this idea that brown people don't do that Muslims don't do that, and that autistic people weren't capable of doing that. That in question being transitioning. And what I realized as I got older is that that was societal stigma trying to keep me back from the things that would make me feel the most alive and comfortable in my body. So I wish I'd known that brown people, Muslim people, autistic people, people with multiple disabilities can all be trans, and that doesn't make them any less valid. I also wish that I'd known that colonialism impacts the way that we view trans people in the US, and that it impacts the way that the Islamic community in the US sees transition. For example, like the fact that there are hijras and other types of non-cis identified people in India and Pakistan and other places within South Asia was never brought up to me as a part of my common education, and it was never brought up to me as a part of my Muslim education when I was in Sunday school. So I didn't realize that there were a lot of people like me, both in the Quran and just in general, walking around in life in the regions where my parents came from. So knowing that I'm not that weird, but also that my variations are okay and they're normal, would be really important. But also, I wish that I'd known that it's okay for your transness to not look like someone else's, that it's okay for your transness to not look binary, and that it's okay for your gender identity to shift over time, and that you'll get where you're meant to be at any point in time when you get there. Like when I was younger, I was really hung up on the idea that I couldn't be transmasculine because I liked skirts and I liked makeup and I liked a lot of traditionally feminine things. But the reality was, in my head, I kept thinking, I really wish I could be a boy, or I really wish I could be something closer to a boy. And eventually I realized you can just be a boy. That's allowed. And once I got there, I felt a lot more comfortable, and I realized that that was who I was supposed to be. So, yeah, I would go with nonconformity is okay. People of all races and backgrounds and religious identities and neurodivergencies and types of brains all can be trans, and it's all okay. Share some advice for young trans or genderqueer people just beginning this journey. What you'd like them to know, where they can get info, things to be aware of. Okay, so what I'd like young trans people to know before anything else is your LGBT history, and particularly your trans history. Know where we came from and know the people that built the movement that lets us be who we are today. So that means looking through projects like Making Queer History or podcasts that talk about making queer history. That means looking at blogs like Transgriot, which is TRANSGRIOT, and other blogs that have been made and run by trans women of color, particularly Black trans women. Know that our history and our movement was built by trans people of color, particularly, again, Black trans women, and that we owe them a great deal of respect, not just for that, but in general, and that a lot of our people are dying right now and always have been. And I don't say that to scare you. I don't say that to scare young trans people, but I say that so that you understand that our history is ongoing, our movement is not over, and there's still a lot of work to be done. And you're a part of that history and you're a part of that movement. And while it's okay to be scared and intimidated, and it's okay to need some time to learn, it's part of our legacy to build from what we have and to never take it for granted. I'd also like you to know about the fact that that's a lot to take in, and it's okay to not be all the way there yet. It's okay to start small in terms of your actual transition. It's okay if your first steps are things like painting your nails or doing your hair a different way, buying a different gender clothing than what you would typically wear. It's okay for your steps to have to be done in private if you don't feel that your family would be accepting, or if you're just not really up for coming out. It's okay to experiment with different names in LGBT groups. It's okay to experiment with different names outside of LGBT groups. Just be aware that sometimes you're going to get pushback and that we have to deal with that and navigate that as trans people. And that might not always be safe for us. It's okay to experiment. It's okay to be uncertain. I would say definitely take care of yourself and leave a dedicated time during your day to just not think about it. Leave yourself an hour a day where you're completely focused on literally anything but your transition. Whether that's knitting or playing a video game or blogging about things that aren't related to transition, give yourself a break sometimes, because the process of figuring yourself out and the process of understanding yourself can be exhausting. Give yourself time, give yourself downtime, give yourself time to process. Take as long as you damn well need, because understanding you is a process. And it's okay that it's a process. It's meant to be a process because it's a big thing. I would also say for young disabled trans people and for young people who are neurodivergent in general, and who think they might be trans, it's okay to think through it. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to not be sure. But know that there is representation of us out there, and I would say seek it out and talk to those people. But also don't be afraid to talk to your friends and your family and other people in your life and kind of go, hey, these are things I've been thinking about. How would you feel about helping me by doing X, Y, or Z? Whether that's talking to a friend and saying, hey, when we're in private, would you sometimes mind switching up your pronouns with me just to see how it feels? Again, obviously, go within your safety confines. If a person you think might be dangerous, don't do it. But if you're in an environment where you can do those things, or if you can get to an environment like an LGBT group where it is safe to do those things, go for it. I would say there's definitely an environment and an expectation for young disabled people that says that we're not competent enough or capable enough to make our own decisions about transitions. Know and understand from an older trans person that is not true. We are capable and confident as ourselves, And while it might take us some time to figure it out at first, or hell, even down the line, we have the same right to question and we have the same right to arrive at conclusions as anyone else that is not disabled. You have a right to transition, you have a right to have people respect your identity. And even if it's scary, even if it's hard, that doesn't change the fact that it's your right. In terms of other stuff that I would like to share with folks who are on a gender journey, I would say there is this tendency to assume that transness looks one way, that transness sounds one way, and that you have to be really sure from a young age, and then suddenly you know, and then everything changes and everything is perfect and everything's fine. And that's not the case for everybody. Transition can be messy. Transition can mean finding out midway through college. It can mean figuring things out when you're a lot older. And there is no wrong age to start figuring it out. You know, there are people in their 50s, 60s, 70s who transition, and that doesn't mean that they aren't real. That means that that can mean a variety of things. It can mean societal factors prevented them from coming out earlier, but it can also mean that people just figured it out later. And that's okay. It's okay if your disabilities mean that you can't transition in a traditional manner. It might mean that you have to wear things that don't fit the gender that you see yourself as due to medical conditions. That's okay. That doesn't change the fact that your pronouns and your identity should be respected. It's okay if you have medical conditions that prevent you from hormonally transitioning, if that's something that you feel that you need. That doesn't change the fact that your name, your pronouns, your identity should be respected. And while the trans community as a whole has a long way to go in terms of respecting that, understand that it's your right, and that while you might have to fight for it, it's something that you deserve and something that you are owed. I would say for rural trans people and for people that are coming from small towns, understand that while it might be a further uphill climb for some of us, it doesn't change the fact that we exist and that we can gain access to whatever we need to transition. It might mean going further. It might mean looking in places like other states. It might mean looking in different counties or cities. But we do exist and we happen. Some of us move to the big city, some of us don't. And regardless of what you choose to do, you have the ability and you have the right to a body and a brain and an identity externally and internally that fits you. I would also say for Muslims who are considering their gender identity, there is a really great pamphlet called I'm Muslim and My Gender Might Not Fit Me. There's a really good pamphlet called I'm Muslim and My Gender Doesn't Fit Me that talks about Islam and gender identity that I would highly recommend people reading if you're Muslim and you think you might be trans. I would say for South Asian folks who might just be starting to come out or who are struggling with family issues, Desi Rainbow Parents and Allies is a really great group. I would say, in general, don't hesitate to reach out to local LGBT groups. Don't hesitate to reach out to people who you think would be accepting and talk to them. And in general, just don't keep it all inside. If you can help it, if it's in any way possible, don't keep it all inside. Because it's a big, heavy weight to carry, and eventually it'll bog you down. I spent a lot of time early on in my transition thinking that I was the only one, and that I would be the first of my kind, the first in my family, the first Muslim, the first brown person in my city to transition. And while in some ways I was the most visible in the town that I grew up in, that doesn't change the fact that there are a whole lot more people like me out there. And while I didn't know how to find them, I once I figured out that they were there, that gave me a whole lot of confidence. So don't hesitate to reach out. Don't hesitate to try and figure out what you're doing. Don't hesitate to give yourself time and range to figure it out. Likelier than not, you're not the only one. And likelier than not, you will be able to find people parallel to you out there, whether that's on Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram. We are out here, and it's okay to seek us out, ask us for help, but also just to see us and know that we're there.